Nigel Leehane is an environmental management consultant with more than 25 years' experience of working with companies to improve their environmental performance. Nigel, take it away.
Thanks, Laura. Well, hello, everybody. I'm going to be talking today about the challenges facing environmental auditors. Environmental auditors face a range, or an increasing range of expectations for their performance, including the range of subjects they're required to audit, being capable of participating in integrated audits, and dealing with a growing number of standards. In many cases, they're also under-resourced and inadequately trained. In this session, I want to explore these challenges and suggest ways in which environmental auditors can rise to meet them, adding value to the process and increasing the standing of the profession. I'm an environmental auditor myself for over 25 years, auditing in the UK and globally, in a range of sectors, mainly industrial, manufacturing, oil and gas, power, etc. I've also been involved in developing standards for BSI and ISO in relation to auditing and management systems. So ISO 19011, the guideline standard for auditing management systems, as well as ISO 14001 and now 45001. And currently I'm chairing both the BSI and ISO environmental auditing subcommittees. So what I want to talk about today, meeting the challenges facing environmental auditors, starting with exploring the context for environmental auditing. I also want to consider how the different roles in environmental auditing have a bearing on the outcomes of audits, and how we need to ensure that all parties share expectations of the process. And then finally, we'll look at how we can improve audit effectiveness and deliver value. So the context for environmental auditing. The range of situations faced by environmental auditors is vast, influenced by their roles as internal or external auditors and the types of audits they undertake. These could be EMS audits, compliance, due diligence, or one of many different specific types, such as waste auditing or waste minimization auditing. In this presentation, much of the discussion focuses on EMS or ISO 14001 audits, but the principles can be extended to almost any type of environmental audit. Environmental auditors are facing many new challenging situations resulting from expectations for them to undertake different types of audits, including integrated management systems audits and supplier audits, and some elements of social or ethical auditing, potentially into the realms of human rights, supplier audits, ethical and, human rights, anti-bribery and corruption, modern-day slavery, etc. These have significant implications for competence, with integrated audits requiring expertise in numerous disciplines and areas like ethical performance requiring very different knowledge and skills. There are also increasing numbers of standards and schemes globally requiring audits, including things like information on performance, management processes and objectives for submission to stock exchanges, and management systems for things like sustainable events. Organizations are increasingly aware of the cost of auditing, whether that's for external certification audits, maintaining multidisciplinary internal audit teams, or simply the time taken and loss of productivity due to hosting audits. This can result in pressure on auditors to produce results with inadequate time resources and can lead to the loss of expertise if internal teams are downsized and not augmented by specialist external support. The implications of auditor roles. Well, there are a number of roles I want to discuss, roles which have very different parts to play in the overall effectiveness of delivering audit results. The professional auditors spend much of their time and their working life undertaking audits, internally for their own organization or externally as a service to clients. They should have a thorough understanding of auditing principles, methods, and practices, and have the requisite soft skills. They should also have experience of a range of audit situations and be familiar with the disciplines and sectors they're auditing. They do not overstretch themselves beyond their areas of competence and are able to deliver valuable audit results with minimal guidance from those managing the audit program. For part-time auditors, environmental auditing is only a part of the day job, and as a result, they're likely to have considerably less experience than professional auditors. They may be limited in the scope of the audits they can undertake, and so may require support at times from more experienced auditors. They may also be less capable in communicating audit findings. Individuals responsible for managing audit programs can have hugely varying degrees of experience in environmental auditing, potentially managing multiple discipline audit programs within large organizations, or maybe having other technical roles within smaller organizations. They may not have detailed knowledge of environmental aspects or their management. Senior management have two primary roles in relation to environmental auditing. Firstly, they authorize the resources needed for auditing. And secondly, they use the output from the audits. In an ideal world, they'll value the findings of audits and act on them to drive environmental performance. And because of this, they will ensure audits are adequately resourced and supported. This means that they'll encourage staff to appreciate the value of auditing and to cooperate meaningfully in the audits. And then auditees, they make an important contribution, but that can vary depending on their openness, their attitude, the pressures that they're under, and the culture of the organization. So the success of an audit program will depend very much on the capabilities and attitudes of all of the participants in the process. And auditors have an important role to play in shaping these attitudes by acting professionally and demonstrating the value that audits can deliver. I like to think about the expectations that there are of audits and of auditors. And I think there are some lessons that we need to learn from this. A very real failing in auditing is the lack of meaningful planning of audits and audit programs. And in many cases, those involved are simply going through the motions of ensuring that a program of audits is undertaken just to fulfill the requirements of ISO 14001. Although some thought may have been given to ensuring the management of key environmental aspects is prioritized, i.e. a simple form of risk-based auditing, this may not be related to the important factors for the organization. In other words, even if the risks are addressed in some sort of prioritized manner, there is often little consideration of the opportunities. This will result in audits that do not consider the right things, so fail to deliver maximum value. Another significant failing is matching audit scope and objectives with the resources available. Overambitious audits will not meet up to expectations, as there's not enough time, or there are too few auditors or audits in the program to undertake the work needed. The result is an incomplete set of findings, potentially missing key risks or opportunities for improvement, and potentially providing a false sense of security and well-being. Auditors should be honest and include in their audit reports any failure to fully fulfill the scope and objectives. And if they're involved in the planning process, auditors should apply their expertise to ensure that the scope and objectives are matched by the resources available. Similarly, it's vital that the auditors or audit team have the necessary competence to fulfill the audit objectives and scope. This includes the technical knowledge related to environmental aspects and their management, familiarity with the activities undertaken by the auditee, and generic auditor skills. The latter may include the ability to communicate with senior management, as well as the basic soft skills needed to put auditees at ease and elicit sufficient information to provide robust findings. How can we make audits more effective? This is not just about auditors working harder, but also ensuring that all those involved in auditing appreciate the practicalities of auditing. So we'll look at some of these topics individually. It's important that audits proceed smoothly, avoiding pitfalls such as confusion over dates and times, last-minute changes to scope, access to staff and sites and documented information, etc. Auditors should ensure that they have sufficient information about the auditee, whether of a client in an external audit or of another department within a business. This includes being aware of the activities in scope, knowing who should be audited, understanding how and where information is held, etc. For example, pitfalls include finding processes with which the auditor has no experience, be they industrial manufacturing technologies, environmental abatement controls, or service delivery methods. Complex data management systems are becoming more common, and auditors may need to access these on-site or remotely, and have the skill to navigate them and identify and retrieve relevant data. Good communications with the auditee are helpful in confirming arrangements and preventing surprises, both to the auditor and the auditee. Modern technology has a part to play and can be applied to make auditing more effective. In addition to efficient data retrieval, auditors can benefit from using a range of digital media for capturing information and presenting it, including digital photography, potentially using GPS cameras, voice recording, tablets for note-taking. In some situations, remote communications methods can be effective. For example, using Skype to interview staff who are not present during site visits, or using remote cameras or even drones to make observations of inaccessible or distant facilities. Auditors need to be comfortable with these technologies and apply them using protocols agreed with the auditees. But I think, in overview, many of these new technologies can be very efficient and effective and allow auditors to make use of their time more effectively. I'd like to think a bit about the skills and competencies needed for auditors, both in terms of basic knowledge and emerging audit topics and how to deal with those. But auditors need to refresh their knowledge and their approaches to auditing. This applies to experienced auditors as well as those who are keen to improve their skills. Mentoring is an effective and efficient method of raising competence, especially in larger organizations where more experienced auditors can pass on their experience to junior staff. However, in small organizations, it may be difficult for individual auditors to find a mentor. They may be thrown in at the deep end. Even in these situations, it may be possible to learn from external auditors who visit the business or the facility. All auditors should keep up to date with developments relevant to their disciplines, for example, changes in legislation or emerging technologies and management practices relevant to their sectors. However, in my experience, many auditors have not made sufficient efforts to understand the implications of the new requirements of ISO 14001:2015. Much of this maintenance and development of competence can be accomplished by various means, including continuing professional development processes, individual research, networking, etc., perhaps rather than the more costly formal training, but that does also have a place. In some circumstances, auditors need to give serious consideration to their competence to fulfill particular audit scopes. For example, how should an environmental auditor respond when asked to carry out an EHS audit of a facility? Does the auditor have enough knowledge of health and safety management to be able to do this effectively? It'll depend very much on the precise scope of the audit, together with the auditor's knowledge and experience. For example, a lower level of specialist expertise would be needed to audit conformance with a simple operational procedure that has EHS requirements, for example, using the specified PPE, compared to carrying out a full EHS compliance audit of a construction site. Auditors wanting to expand into other specialist areas like health and safety or human rights will need a thorough understanding of these issues, the practices, legislation, and standards in order to become true multidisciplinary auditors. And this may take an extensive period of working in these areas plus training before being competent to audit them. Their employers and those responsible for managing audit programs also need to understand the competencies needed for particular audits, for auditing different disciplines, as well as understanding how integrated systems work. I think that's a key point I'd like to emphasize, that again, in my experience, there's often a lack of understanding by those who are commissioning audits or instructing auditors to carry out audits of the actual competencies needed in some scopes. In terms of auditing approaches that we can adopt, there are a number of issues I'd like to talk through. I think there are growing expectations around the approach to auditing and its output in relation to expectations that management systems will deliver findings related to actual environmental performance rather than just the state of the environmental management system. And obviously that fits in with the new emphasis on environmental performance improvement in ISO 14001:2015. And I think also there's certainly a growing expectation in the marketplace that audits tackle environmental performance. Auditors are expected to look more closely at behaviours as well and organisational culture, rather than simply inspecting documentation. This is an area requiring improvement, not just in environmental auditing, but more broadly in environmental management itself, where there hasn't been the same focus on behavioural issues as there is in health and safety. Again, in my experience, external auditors are often criticised for spending too much time poring over documentation, rather than observing activities and trying to find out why individuals or companies continue to act in a way that's potentially damaging to the environment or to the company's reputation. There's certainly growing expectation that auditors will look at behaviours and try to identify the root causes of inappropriate behaviours. And much can be learnt from our colleagues in the health and safety fraternity, and we shouldn't be reticent about asking for their help. Auditing senior management is another challenge for many auditors who may feel they lack the competence or the authority and the confidence even to do this. In some circumstances, potentially in smaller companies, there's no option other than for an auditor to audit his own line manager or boss. And in some cultures, it's frowned on for junior staff to question their seniors. So all of these pose challenges for auditors. But even where these barriers don't exist, auditors need to be able to communicate with senior management. And this requires some degree of understanding of business management practices and their relationship with environmental management. And similarly, the new requirements in ISO 14001:2015 for the EMS to take account of business strategy and goals means that auditors should be able to understand the interrelationship between business and environmental strategy. Now, it's important to emphasize that not all auditors need to have all of the knowledge and skills that we've been discussing. In larger organizations capable of supporting an audit team, the team collectively needs to have the necessary competencies, but not all of the individual auditors themselves. Finally, I'd like to talk a little bit about adding value in the audit process, which I think is absolutely critical. We're in a very cost-focused world, and auditors need to be trying to do more than just ticking the box. Obviously, there are expectations that a certain number of internal audits need to be undertaken to avoid a non-conformance, but they should be achieving far more than just that. The objective of an audit should be to prompt improvement or change. This means firstly identifying an opportunity for improvement, and secondly communicating the recommendation in such a way as to demonstrate the benefits of taking action. In some cases, this will be to avoid the risk of negative consequences from an actual or potential situation, for example, a pollution incident or illegal non-compliance. However, auditors should also be aware of the potential for identifying opportunities for improvement that will bring business benefits, such as cost savings or innovations in products and services. And regardless of the finding, it should be communicated effectively, whether orally at closing meetings or in a written report. The auditor should spell out the potential consequences as accurately as the evidence permits, highlighting the need for any further investigation of the cause or the development of a solution. The auditor should convey the urgency of the issue and also the scale of the negative or positive consequences. And the auditor should always consider the audience and how to present information to convey the message effectively. If the auditor can encourage senior management to take action, then the audit has been effective and successful. And hopefully senior management will appreciate the value that auditing can deliver. I'll just go back to the right slide there. We're coming up to the conclusion of this presentation. So I think it's important to emphasize that environmental auditors are highly skilled and in many cases with extensive knowledge about the natural environment and the impacts their organization or clients can have on it. Many also have substantial experience of their industries and their businesses, and so can appreciate the interrelationships between good environmental management and business excellence and success. Most auditors have the capacity to respond to new demands and expectations and improve their competencies to meet these changing circumstances. However, we must not lose sight of the need to demonstrate our worth and produce audit findings that genuinely add value. Well, thank you very much for listening, and I hope this has been useful.
Thanks, Nigel. This ends today's presentation. Thanks for listening.